Welcome to Grow Gracefully, a space where we talk about faith, growth, healing, and becoming. I'm your host, Millenia Alis, and Grow Gracefully is a podcast rooted in honest conversation, real testimony, and a safe space to become. It's intentional, authentic, and graceful. Here we uncover the spiritual and personal journey of becoming, allowing the light He's placed inside you to shine through. My guest today is someone whose life reads like 3 or 4 lifetimes packed into one. Dr. Patrick C. Horton is a vice president of program management for a major Department of Defense contractor, a college graduate, professor, and the founder of his own career development company, Professional Career Transitions. But before any of the titles and the credentials, he was a soldier. Dr. Horton is a 3-time combat veteran. He served in Kosovo and completed 2 tours in Iraq. In 2003, he was wounded on battlefield, and he carries the Purple Heart to this day. He titled his book, Lucky to Be Here, and once you hear his story, you'll understand exactly why. Today, he holds a doctorate in management and MBA and some of the most elite credentials in his field. He's a project, program, and professional management professional and a certified information system security professional. He teaches at the doctorate level, leads major programs by day, and spends the rest of his time helping everyday professionals build careers they're proud of. He's based here in Tampa, Florida, and he's living proof that where you start doesn't determine where you finish. Please help me welcome Dr. Patrick C. Horton. Welcome.
Oh, thank you.
Let's just dive in. Let's start with bringing us back to, how you grew up.
Absolutely, yeah. So originally I'm from a small town called Vacaville, California, actually about 20 minutes outside of Sacramento. Actually born in Sacramento, then moved to Vacaville when I was about 4 years old. So pretty much, Vacaville in Spanish is actually called Cowtown. That's what it actually
Really?
translates,
Okay.
right? So back in the early 80s in California, in the Bay Area, Vacaville was like pretty much 30 minutes from Sacramento, about 40 minutes from San Francisco, like right in the middle. Pretty much a small farm town where you think you had one major grocery store area. We had one McDonald's, one Burger King. And it was pretty much that small, almost like a Midwest town, like right smack in the middle of California. So grew up there as a youth, really big into sports early on, and a great, small town kind of community where it was just a great place to grow up.
Okay, awesome. You talk about sports. It was baseball.
Mm-hmm.
I read. So what got you into baseball? Like what made you interested in?
Yeah, like most young people, right? When you're about 4 or 5 years old, your parents kind of look for something for you to do, sports or clubs, get involved in early. And, my mom was a single mom. She worked about 30 years for California Solano Correctional Institution. And so, just while she was at work, she was just looking for activities for me to get into. And, back in the early 80s, Little League Baseball was like the talk of the town.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody would show up to the big games in town, things like that. So just started playing when I was about 4 or 5 years old. And it's just one of those things where just started playing early, actually started getting good at it. That's where you found a lot of the mentors and different kids from the city, things like that. And then just kind of, started playing baseball early on throughout the years.
And with that, how did that look throughout school for you?
Absolutely. So, once you're kind of like, in one of those kind of like youth baseball leagues, you start meeting kids from other different high schools. You're playing in the local league. I think I can remember from the time I turned 13 years old, I was playing about 60 games this summer. If you can imagine that, right? Yeah, I think like a major league schedule is about 100 so games per year.
Oh my goodness.
And they've kind of done a lot of studies on that, like travel sports. Can you burn your kids out by playing too many baseball games?
Yeah.
But that's really how I really started, gaining traction on my skill set and getting better, and really became known in the kind of Northern California, like kind of baseball scene. Is every summer kids from 13 years old are playing travel ball where they're traveling up and down California. I'd spend weekends in San Francisco, San Jose, go up to Oregon, Washington, and play baseball all throughout the Northwest. So pretty much 60 games this summer from the time I was 13 through 18 years old. So.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. So with that, how was high school for you?
Mm-hmm.
And what decisions did you make after high school to land you to where you're at?
Like most young people, high school was tumultuous, right? It was definitely a lot of ups and downs. For the most part, an extremely positive experience. Got to play baseball all 4 years, played varsity for 3 years, had an opportunity to go play for Sacramento State. We'll get into that story, kind of made a few mistakes along the way, things like that, but had the typical experience that any young person has. You're starting your first early social circle experiments, your initiations into dating, things like that, really kind of starting to shape what you think the outside world is going to be like after you turn 18. Because essentially, you go into high school, I always joke, what's the difference between a 17-year-old and an 18-year-old? It's one day.
Yeah.
One day you're a youth just going to school every day,
Yeah.
dating, concerned with high school politics. And from there, you're thinking about, what am I going to do as an adult? How am I going to go into a career? My goal was to play sports, and to play professional baseball. And, you're just kind of at that impasse where you've got to make those decisions. And most people don't understand how important those early high school days are to shaping your professional career, professional future. Had I look back at it now, had I really focused more in high school, I mean, high school was essentially wasn't that difficult. Just, as a youth, you just get distracted. You don't really pour your into it.
Yeah.
But all in all, a positive experience. Really got to take my baseball career to the next level and really get recognized statewide. I was actually All-American in high school in baseball.
Awesome.
And then from there, just kind of, obviously, we'll probably get to the story how, at my senior years when I started having challenges and things kind of changed.
Okay. Yeah, let's dive into that. What your senior year. Before that, I do want to mention, I loved, you had mentioned your grandmother walking you to school.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Really, that was just sentimental. Just the background of her going up to third grade, I believe.
Absolutely.
And I thought that was just beautiful.
And as an adult, you can kind of reflect back on those, experiences. And like I said, like any third, fourth, fifth grader whose elementary school is like one block away, you think you're an adult, you're independent. I can walk on my own. Walking with a crowd of like 3 or 4 kids as you walk right around the corner.
Yeah.
And then, I think, I talk about it in the book, one day I just kind of stopped, because, you just think you're embarrassed because you got an old country lady with a big, flower skirt following you behind going to school, right? So I kind of stopped and said, Grandma, why do you walk me to school every day? Because, I can walk around the corner. It's not a big deal. And when she kind of said, hey, I just want to make sure you get an education because I only got to the 3rd grade, put everything in perspective. And even as an adult, as I look back now, it's like, wow, that was that big for her.
Yeah.
Think about when you don't have the choice but to go past 3rd grade and then you have a grandchild, you're like, hey, this is how important this is. I didn't have those options in life. And now you do. I've got to make sure you appreciate those.
Exactly. Honestly, can relate. My grandparents, it was 1st and I believe 2nd grade. And then they just had to kind of work in the farm there from Puerto Rico. So it's just like, wow, you do put that so much more in perspective as an adult than when you're younger. You're like, oh, okay, you can take it for granted.
Absolutely.
But now going to senior year, what kind of trouble did you get into?
Everything, every piece of trouble you could get into, I got to. So essentially, senior year, I was actually having my breakout year in baseball. I was one of the top baseball players in the state of California. So some of you guys may know there was a popular baseball player that's a Hall of Famer named CC Sabathia. And he actually was a senior. He went to Vallejo High School, and I went to Wilson Wood High School out of Vacaville, California. And we all played in the Moncello Empire League, which is like one of the D1 high school leagues. And when we graduated in 1998, he was the number 1 player in the league, and I was actually the number 2 player in the league. I was throwing about 90 miles an hour, hit like 400 or 500. And so senior year, I was having my breakout year. But like anything in life, you just start drinking a little bit of beer. You start smoking a little reefer. You start, as you're kind of coming into your adult years, you're paying more attention to girls than your school. You maybe skip school a little bit here and there. Nothing like too crazy, but enough to kind of get myself distracted. And I basically just let my grades completely slip from, I think I had, between a 3.3 and a 3.5 to a 1.7 my senior year. Just completely was like, I don't care about going to school. I'm not going to pay attention to this English class. I'm not going to, and I just let my grades completely go. And then the second I did that, I actually had been conditionally accepted to go to Sacramento State. And I was actually in talks with the coaching to go play baseball there. And then I became ineligible my senior year. And everything changed from there. So basically my admittance to Sac State got dropped. I was kind of like, oh, wow. And then I think I only missed 1 game of baseball because you can appeal.
Yeah.
But it's one of those things where my life, I grew up from 4 or 5 years old wanting to play professional baseball to now, what am I going to do with my life? I have no ideas of what direction I want to take my life in from here. So I was just completely lost.
Wow. Yeah. And they didn't highlight having to have a good GPA to hold that, or it just kind of maybe.
They probably did. I just didn't pay attention to it. Probably, in order to get into college, right, you've got to have some kind of a 2.5 to 3.0 or something along those lines.
Yeah.
And when your GPA drops below or you fail at English class, that's a core requirement to go to college. You just lost your admittance, essentially. But, I didn't know it in the time. But,
until after.
Until it was too late. Until I got the letter after I submit I think it was like my transcripts from like the semester. And then as soon as I think you had to submit it like ahead of time. And when I did, they were like, sorry, you failed English. You need to go to summer school before we admit you again, or if we admit you again. And at that point in time, I was like, wow, now what am I going to do? I have no clue at that.
So where were you in your headspace, and how did you feel like you kind of transitioned out of that?
So I went from having the best year of my baseball career as a senior to having the worst off summer in my baseball career. went from hitting like 500 to hitting like 150 because I was just depressed.
Yeah.
I was lost in life. Obviously, I wasn't going to play baseball. I really hadn't thought about any other professional career, whether it be in law or communications or things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So literally the first 6 months out of high school, I went to Solano Community College for 6 months. Took a couple of criminal justice classes because my professional dream was to become an attorney. Mm-hmm. So I was like, I'm just going to take a couple of criminal justice classes at the junior college and just kind of like floated around for 6 or 7 months and wasn't really working. I wasn't a good employee. My attitude had changed. It's one of those things where when you're a youth, and this is just my humble opinion, if you are, drinking a little bit of beer or things like that, those things are fun when life is going good, but they'll work against you once you start having challenges in life.
Yeah.
So those things begin to your confidence, your mood, things like that start to drain. So that's why those things are fairly dangerous when you're young. So 6 months are going by. I've got nothing going on in life. And one of my buddies, his mom worked for IBM. She was like a Lotus Notes, kind of like a mail email server, home network kind of a engineer. And she came home one day. We were just hanging out at Sean's house. And she said, hey, Horton, what are you up to? I was like, I don't know, just hanging out. She's like, what are you doing with your life? I was like, nothing. I got no clue where I'm going. And she goes, hey, I want to show you something. So she pulls out a check and she shows me a $4,000 check. And we're talking about, this is 1999. Yeah. That's a lot of money, right? And people don't even make half of that per month.
Yeah.
And I go, well, what did you do to do that? And she goes, I just went to this rich person's house and I set up a home network for him. Basically, I set up a computer, a printer, and a hard drive. Remember, back then, that was cutting edge technology.
Yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
And I got paid $4,000 for this weekend. I was like, I don't know what that is, but whatever you're doing, I want to do that.
Exactly.
So she goes, hey, my son, Sean, he's getting ready to go to Heald Technical College, which is a technical school in Sacramento. He's going to be commuting every day from Vacaville. It's like a 1.5-year program where you get like your certified electronics technician and an associate's degree. If you got nothing going on, why not try going to Heald and maybe getting into IT? You're talking about the late 90s in the Bay Area. Mm-hmm. It was basically the .com boom. Yeah. Why not get some kind of a help desk job? You can make good money, gain some independence until you figure out which one to do with your life. Yeah. And I was like, yeah, absolutely. So just kind of said, okay, well, fine. I got nothing else going on. So went to the parents and kind of sold them on that potential career path and went to Heald Technical College, and from there just kind of started making progress.
Awesome. Mm-hmm. Awesome. So you then went through that program and completed that.
Correct. Yep.
What circled you to go into the military?
So essentially, I went to Heald, and remember, I kind of grew up with, there was like a computer in the home, but it was like in one location, didn't really know a lot about computers. So I got like a certified electronics technician and an associate's degree. So I was kind of faced with the decision, okay, do I try to find a help desk job in the Bay Area, or what are my options? So one of the things that Heald taught me was to make a business decision in life. Instead of like being emotional and going, I want to go back and play baseball again. Let's go try this again. Yeah. Let's lay out all your options and see what the best ones are. So I kind of sat down with a notepad. I wrote pros and cons. Okay, if I get a job in the Bay Area, I'm going to make maybe about 10 to 15 bucks an hour. I'll be close to home. But my problem was I didn't have any real experience and I didn't have any connections. I didn't know anybody. Mm-hmm. So who was going to give me that job? And you didn't know how to write resumes and really apply for things back then. There wasn't really like, you didn't just go to an online forum and apply for jobs. It was kind of new back then. The internet was really kind of coming on board. So, and then I think I had driven past an Army recruiting station on my way to school one day. I said, let me go talk to the Army recruiter just to see maybe if there's something there. Yeah. So when I talked to the Army recruiter, they really laid out a good case for me. Said, hey, if you join the Army, you'll get to pick your job, which means you'll get your first job experience. You'll become a veteran. We'll give you a full ride scholarship to go back to college, which is a 4-year paid for degree. Yeah. You'll get veterans preference. And then he said, a lot of times the companies you want to work for after the military typically work for you while you're in the military. So I was a sergeant in the Army, and I would have companies, a multi-million, the Microsofts, the Ciscos, all the Boeings, the Lockheeds, they all work for the military. You can network with them and then get out and get a job. Yeah. And he said, not to mention, you're going to get one of the most competitive advantages you'll have in life, and that's leadership. Mm-hmm. It's one thing to have a technical skill, but to have the discipline to wake up on time, to cut your hair, to balance your finances, all those core skills the military gives you. If you can build that foundational leadership structure in your life, everything else you go do for going forward is going to be easy. You'll be able to gain momentum and have the confidence to move forward. So that's when I kind of started looking at the military. And not to mention, it gave me like a free gym membership. Yeah. Right? I'm just like going to go to the gym. I don't pay $100 for a gym membership.
Exactly.
And I said, I think, and
a lot of the benefits work.
And not to mention, I think I kind of mentioned in the book, sometimes when you have a public mishap in life, it's hard to rebound in the same city that you had those public, kind of, you failed. Mm-hmm. You got a little bit of shame on you. And I'm not saying you should run away from your problems, but it's hard for every time you see people, they just remember the guy that was supposed to go play pro baseball that now is just working at a fast food place and with no direction in life. Yeah. And having to relive that guilt and shame is difficult for an 18-year-old who doesn't know themselves, right? So sometimes it's a good thing to get a fresh start.
Yeah.
Go see the world. I just wanted to go see the world and go
Yeah.
overseas and see what life had to offer, and the military gave me that.
Yeah, and honestly, that was the perfect way
Perfect thing. I got to go somewhere and start fresh. No one knew me except for the person that I showed up as that day.
Yeah. And so how do you feel, coming from the darker place and in that time, in that age, to like building those leadership skills? And how do you feel it transformed you a lot?
Absolutely. And I think that in today's day and age, right, I think, it's probably not a secret, right? We're seeing a lot of young men struggle with kind of finding their footing, especially like after high school, the young adults. Do I go to college? Do I go, what do I do with my life?
There's so many options.
And I'm not saying that therapy isn't a good thing for young men, but I think more than anything, young men need instruction. They don't need to, sometimes young men don't need to talk their feelings out. They need to go somewhere where there's another mentor that's 26, 27, a staff sergeant that's been there and done that in life and tells them, hey, young man, I need you to show up on time. I need you to cut your hair. I need you to look straight. I need you to shake hands and say, yes, ma'am, no, ma'am, yes, sir, no, sir. That's what a lot of young men needed, and that's what I needed. So, I was a low confidence young man. I really didn't have any footing in life. And when I joined the military, I met other confident older men that gave me that brotherhood that I needed in order to kind of, it's about accomplishing one small goal at a time and then getting confidence from that. And that's what basic training did. It designed to kind of stress you out and put you in difficult situations, make you make decisions when you're tired, when you're grumpy, when you're having to work in a team and things like that. And I got to join a brotherhood that actually their responsibility was to take care of you. So that really threw me over the hump, essentially.
That's awesome. Do you still have those connections?
Absolutely. It's funny. We still have I was in 3-7 Infantry Battalion out of 3rd ID out of Fort Stewart, Georgia for my 5.5 years in the military. And we actually still have reunions today. 3-7 Infantry Battalion reunion. The guys will go down to, matter of fact, I think they met in I think at Fort Stewart, Georgia. They all went out and had drinks at some of the local pubs, things like that. Yeah. We've actually gone on vacation. I have an apartment in Medellin, Colombia. Okay. My girlfriend's Colombian. And I actually brought them down to Colombia, and we actually went out to like a couple of the local fine dining restaurants, mountainside overlooking the city, a couple of like the little lounges and things like that. But we definitely have still reunions. Like, it's funny. Some of the guys that I was a sergeant in the Army with, some of those guys are attorneys today. Some of those guys are, teachers today. Some of those guys are government contractors today. So a lot of people did well. Some people didn't do as well, but it's good to see that some of those guys really came out okay.
Yeah. And just being able to have those networking and connections that you had mentioned, that's definitely a blessing coming out of the service, which also, thank you for my freedom.
Thank you. I appreciate that. It is obviously not, it's one of those things where, once you travel the world and you gain a deeper appreciation for America. The fact that, we can have Democrats and Republicans and people can debate topics, and then you can go to the polls and vote whichever way you'd like to vote. Yeah. There's a lot of countries that, I lived in Afghanistan for 4 or 5 years. I lived in Iraq for 2 or 3 years. Yeah. I lived in different countries around the world where they were dictatorships, and you really get a great appreciation for what America is and what it offers. There's so much opportunity here in the States as compared to, some of the challenges that you'll see overseas.
Yeah. And to be able to experience that like firsthand is
right. Experience it and then come back and you're like, wow, we do have it good here. Yeah. It could be, something different.
Thank you. Going deeper into the military and the service that you have given, being in the series of second chances, I would love for you to shine light on that time in your life and just the near-death situation.
Absolutely. So, and I think that's a key pivotal moment in my life where I really embraced the concept of second chances, not just a second chance to live, right, but a second chance to be present, appreciate, like almost looking at second chances as a practice in your life. Like, wow, I have an opportunity to be present and really get the most potential out of my life. So essentially, it was 2002, and it was like around January timeframe where, the war was declared with Iraq. And I was an E4 specialist in the Army, and my unit 3-7 Infantry was tasked to go overseas to Iraq. And my unit's mission was actually to take Baghdad Airport. So I was actually in 3-7 Infantry Battalion, 3rd Infantry Division, and I was in a mechanized tank armory division, essentially. And my unit's mission was to start in the northern part of Kuwait and drive all the way up to Baghdad, take the airport, and then hold the airport. That was our strategic objective. We get 10 minutes outside the airport, and we're getting ready to move forward and, basically obtain the objective, essentially take Baghdad Airport. Yeah. And we're parked on the side of the road. And what we don't know is that, basically there's bad guys in the housing to the left and to the right of us. So essentially the bad guys started shooting rockets at us. And one of the rockets landed in a pile of munitions, and the pile of munitions exploded. So basically, when we started getting shot at, I grabbed my weapon, I went to turn the corner to take cover, and then I black out. And then I wake up, and then I'm like, what's going on? And then people are like, oh my God, he's alive. And then I black out again, and then I wake up again, and I'm looking around me, and I'm like, I see a bunch of Iraqis to my left, my right. I'm like, oh no, I got captured. So I'm like, and then I'm like, hold on, and I can hear rotary wings, and I'm realizing, okay, maybe I'm getting medevaced out of here. And so what had happened was, as I turned the corner, one of those RPGs hit a pile of munitions, and it propelled a tank barrel out of the explosion and hit me in the back and broke 3 of my ribs. So I was medevaced from essentially right next to Baghdad Airport to northern Kuwait, which was Camp Wolf, which is like a big field hospital where they took all the wounded at the time. And essentially I was in ICU for a week, clinging on to life. I had like 3 broken ribs, a punctured lung, just like the impact had really caused damage. So literally I'm kind of like, you're in and out of consciousness, you're dehydrated, things like that. And one of the doctors walked over to me, and I was kind of in and out of consciousness, and he looked at me and he looked at the guy next to me, and he goes, let's not focus on this guy because he's probably not going to make it. And I kind of heard that, and I was like, oh my God. So then they started working on this guy. I kind of lost consciousness again.
Oh my goodness.
And then when I woke up, they said, hey, you need to breathe through this tool. It's like a little toy where you can say you need to keep your torso inflated so you don't get pneumonia. So I had to breathe through this little tool, things like that. And as I was kind of sitting there in what could have been my final ending place, I said to myself, hey, wow, that could have been it. My life could be over. Am I a good person? Did I go talk to that girl? Did I live life with respect and integrity? Am I the person that if I were to go today, my life had meaning? And my answer was no. And I was like, wow, I was like, just sitting there like, I don't know if this is going to be it or not. And I kind of said to myself, not even a religious person really, but I said, God, if you give me another shot, I promise I'll do something with my life. And then and I didn't know what that was going to be at the time, but from that point forward, I was like, let me go ahead and start really getting serious about life, be more present, not just let time go by. Let me try to put some kind of a plan in place and do something. If I've got another shot at life, let me not just live and go and get by. Let me actually make something important out of it. Let me make sure I give back to the next person, things like that. So that kind of started my journey of second chances. Like, wow, I literally was almost gone. And, and then you're playing scenarios out in your mind because you're just sitting in ICU with tubes hooked up to you and things like that. And, you kind of know the routine, right? The casualty assistance officer takes an American flag to 1000 Beeler Drive in Vacaville, California, and presents it to your parents saying, sorry, we've lost your young man on the battlefield. That was, I was playing that out in my mind that my mom was going to get that flag.
Yeah.
So from there, I was like, wow, that could have been her had I not had my vest on, which I actually take you back to the story. I didn't have my vest on, and then first sergeant walked the line, I quickly threw it on, and then an explosion happened. They said, had you not had that vest on, it would have cut you in half, you'd have been gone.
Oh.
But luckily, my first sergeant saved us all by walking the line to make sure we had our gear on. It's 110 degrees outside, so you're trying to be cool. But yeah, so all those scenarios played in my mind, and then I eventually said, okay, I need to make something out of myself, not just kind of skate on by.
Wow. Thank you for sharing. That is so powerful. And just even down to not having your vest on and putting it on just
moments before.
I truly believe that's a blessing and happened for a reason.
Exactly.
So with that second chance, you said prior you were just kind of skating by. What was like your biggest takeaway in the sense of how you were going to do that second chance after you healed?
Neil deGrasse Tyson say recently, he said, don't pay favors back, pay favors forward. One of those things where, if someone does a favor for you and you pay the favor back, the favor ends.
Yeah.
But if someone does a favor for you and you pay that favor forward to someone else, and that person pays that favor forward to someone else, the favor never ends. So it's one of those things where I had such great mentors, whether it be First Sergeant Shirley, First Sergeant Gilpin, Sergeant Smith, young professional non-commissioned officers that took care of me. I almost wanted to make my mission do, if I saw another young person that was having challenges, I wanted to give back to that young person. So I kind of made that my mission to, kind of become almost like the patriarch of my family, to say, hey, I have a lot of young cousins coming up out of Oak Park, Sacramento, California, which is kind of a rougher neighborhood, and they're going to be looking for a direction in life. How can I best, assist them with gaining traction in life out of the gate, as opposed to struggling like I did? And part of it was mentorship, but it was also earning enough income to where when they decided to go to college, I could also support. So that's when I kind of made the decision, as I did, I did 3 combat tours in 4 years, 1 in Kosovo, 2 in Iraq. And I said, hey, there's government contracting jobs back in the Middle East, actually back in Baghdad. I could have been like, oh, I don't want to go do that. But I knew that would give me a career advantage because I get a government contracting job. I'd be able to make 6 figures a year, tax free. And then I could actually help support some of my younger cousins to go back to college, while I was still only 25, 26 years old. So I started paying for cousins to go back to Sacramento City, Consumers River College, and help put people through their bachelor's degree while I was a contractor when I first got out. So that was my way of starting to give back before I, gained more traction and started managing people in my professional career.
Oh, that's so awesome. It's the outlook on like why you did it, the why behind it. And I think that's so much more powerful.
I would add a core central theme there is, what I'd like to get back to the audience is that don't let a near-death experience be the catalyst for you appreciating your second chances, right? We get second chances every day, whether we're exiting a relationship or exiting a career field or a job that we just did. You have a second chance to be better tomorrow at what you just did. Recognize your own mortality today and embrace those second chances as a chance to be present and really do the best you can tomorrow, as opposed to waiting for, you're in Baghdad and a tank barrel hit you in the back. It shouldn't take that, right? That's what, to be able to recognize it now with what we have today, whether what family you're in, what organization you work for, there's always a second chance every day to do something better.
Very true. Even going into this series, I feel like I can relate to that myself because I've been talking to a lot of people about second chances. Now, hence they have been talking about second chances near life and death, but I have put that perspective. You don't have to wait until that particular moment. Every day, just strive to do better and just knowing that why.
Absolutely.
Too. I'm navigating that myself.
Absolutely.
With accomplishing everything that you've accomplished, the master's, the doctorate, I read in your book about don't let failure hinder you. What was a time that failure might have helped you, or that you saw you failed in something, you realized that, that failure was fine. It got me here.
Absolutely. So, some people may know, if you work in the project management field, there's an exam and called the Project Management Professional Certification, right? So I think it was about the year 2011, and this is just an academic one. And I was actually looking to take that exam and pass it and get that certification essentially. So the first time I took the exam, I think I watched some CBT Nuggets videos. And I was like, I was actually working in Afghanistan at the time. I'm just going to fly to Dubai, take the exam, no big deal, and absolutely bombed the exam. And I was basically heartbroken, right? Think about a 4-hour exam that's 200 questions. You got to study for a year to even pass it. And you go in there and you fail a 4-hour exam to know you've got to regroup, restudy again, do all that again, go through all that. And it's heartbreaking, right? You're just like, it just gives you knots in your stomach, essentially. So not only did I fail it once, but I failed it twice. And I was like, my career really can't get going until I pass this exam. So, just kind of being down and out. I don't know if I want to do this anymore, things like that. And I said, the problem is I'm going at this all alone. I keep trying to self-study and read books to saturation, watch videos, but I'm still not getting over the hump. Why don't I hire professional help to help me do this? So I think I enlisted in a boot camp in Dubai and ended up going to a 5-day boot camp and then ended up passing the exam after that. But it was one of those lessons where had I planned and trained the right way the first time, I could have avoided all the pitfalls of failing it once, twice, only failed the third time. And once I've kind of learned that process on how to basically study for something, I learned that, hey, if I'm going to take an exam, study on my own for 3 months, then go to a boot camp where a professional is going to teach you what to know for 5 days, then take it after that. Now you're done in 4 months as opposed to a year and a half.
Exactly.
And that kind of really gave me the confidence that, okay, I failed something big before and I came back to pass it later. It gave me the confidence to go do other things in the future.
Okay. And then navigating that in better ways too.
Absolutely. Exactly.
Seeking out that help. With the boot camp, did it just help you with the studies, for that particular test?
Well, it's let's just say, there's 1,000 question possibility that you could get, right? The boot camp helps you narrow it down to the 200 questions you need to know.
Okay.
As opposed to you're looking at this vast body of information and you don't know what they're going to ask and how they're going to ask it. They really help you hone in on specifically what you need to be prepared for to give you the best opportunity to pass it. And that's what it kind of taught me that, hey, I shouldn't be wasting my time learning all this stuff, and I really need to know this section over here.
Yeah.
And that's what it kind of gave me. It's a quote I heard: "You can't soar with the eagles in the morning if you spend all night hooting with the owls."
Oh, that's a good one.
If you want to be a professional, if you want to be consistent at something, if there's a 3-month project that's a big task that you need to complete, you can't party all night or have a nightlife and then wake up at 7 a.m. and still be functional and things like that. So applying that discipline in your life to be like, okay, every day from 7 a.m. to 4 p.m, I've got to be locked in for this and build a life based on a disciplined schedule like that. And some people think discipline is a bad thing, right? I would argue that discipline gives you the opportunity to make 10 more decisions in your life than otherwise. So think about it, right? If you have no discipline, you don't get any degrees, you don't take any career opportunities that give you, more experience, better pay, you don't get any certifications, your options are actually more limited by living a more frivolous life. But if you have a disciplined life, you get your degrees, your certs, your experience, now you have 10x the opportunities to do anything you want to do. So actually, freedom comes through discipline. It doesn't come through necessarily just living life by any whim that you feel like doing. You really need to lock in on a few things, and that gives you, opportunities to make the most decisions you want.
Well, yeah, for sure. I mean, that's even biblically, if we're going
Right.
that route as well. It speaks of like discipline being the rod and the staff to comfort you. But how do you feel, you've managed to stay disciplined for yourself aside from, what the military has given?
The way I kind of organize my life is that I believe in working hard and partying hard, right? Not necessarily partying like, going crazy, but essentially reward yourself for your hard work. So what I'll do is every year I try to accomplish one goal. Every year I try to either get one certification, one degree program or something academic wise, or one new promotion or lateral change at work. So what I do is, for the first 3-4 months out of the year, I'll do like a certification, right? It's 33 months, take the boot camp, pass an exam. Now I've got 8 months to relax. So you're not going to burn yourself out by trying to do back to back to back. So if you can live life like that, it's almost like, people have to look at their career, they look at their financial portfolio. There's a quote that I use in my program: knowledge acquisition is a compounding asset. The more you learn today, the more you can understand tomorrow, and it snowballs, it builds on top of itself, like your financial portfolio. So let's say, for example, you get your project management professional certification today. Now you're learning things that you would otherwise wouldn't see because you got that baseline knowledge today. And now you're going to build on that over the future. Whereas if you waited 10 years to do it, there's things you're going to miss over time.
Exactly.
There's monies you're going to miss. There's opportunities you're going to miss, things like that. So just having the foresight to say, hey, I'm going to be in this career field for 20 years. Let me just go ahead and write down on a piece of paper, okay, this year I'm going to get this done. Next year I may do that. And then the year after that, maybe I do that. And it doesn't have to be anything you stress yourself out over, but just write down some basic goals and see what you can accomplish. And just do it a couple months out of the year, and then you'll start building momentum over time.
Yeah.
I went from a sergeant in the Army to working on the help desk as a government contractor, and I worked my way all the way up to becoming a vice president. So I was the satellite technician, then I was the manager of the technicians, then I was like a country manager. At one point in time, I was managing the free internet cafe program in Afghanistan for all the troops. So essentially I had 50 contractors working for me. I had 500 internet sites, and I sat in Bagram, Afghanistan, and all the free internet for the troops while they were in the combat zone. I managed all those satellite systems. So this is one of the things where I kind of built that career to that point, and then I worked my way out of being in the field to kind of working corporate worked in Doha, Qatar, Kuwait City, Kuwait, took a job in Hawaii, and then I came to Tampa to become an executive. But essentially, after going through that career of going help desk to vice president, I said, how did I get here? How did I kind of go step by step and kind of build upon that? So I decided to kind of record almost like 100 video lesson series to say, hey, this is how I started from help desk, and this is how every step of my career, how I built momentum by getting the degree, by getting the cert, by getting the experience, taking every management job that was offered to me, and just one step at a time, just kind of building that career and building connections and searching out mentors, not waiting for a mentor to come to me. I would actively walk up to CEOs that were 5-6 levels ahead of me and go, hey, sir, what do you think I should do with my life? Should I have kids? Should I go be in management? Should I get a degree? And you'd be surprised that people are flattered when you ask their opinion. They can't wait to give that tutelage back to you. It makes them think, oh, wow, this person thinks I'm important. Let me go ahead and give something back. So I made it a point to every mentor I can get my hands on, whether it be, I would meet people, I'd be in Fallujah, Iraq, and I would meet like a full bird colonel in the Marine Corps who was a helicopter pilot, and he was the top 1% lawyers in the city of Los Angeles. He was actually New Clarence Thomas, and they used to have Thanksgiving dinner together. And I would be like, okay, what's the meaning of life?
Yeah.
I don't know what I'm going to ask them. But people like that, you'd be surprised how willing they are to sit down and just give guidance. So I made a point, and I even dedicated a chapter in the book to mentorship, to just going up to people that were in high positions and just saying, hey, what do you think I should do? What would be your advice if you could go back and do it all over again? And what you'll really be surprised is how much humanity you'll see in some of these people. You find out that, oh my God, I did it wrong 10 times before I finally got it right. You see the finished product, polished version, but they had stumbled over 10 blocks. So it almost gave me confidence to say, hey, I've made my mistakes too. Life isn't over for me. I can recover. I can forgive myself and move forward and actually get something done in life. And they all went through the same thing I went through. So maybe I'm not irredeemable because I made a couple of mistakes from the show. And that's kind of what,
That's awesome. I definitely happy that you circled around to the mentorship, because that was really a good chapter, just being all the connections, but the way that you even said, you can really see the humanity
Right.
of people being open to actually just like give
Mhm.
you like a piece of, knowledge.
Right.
And then also seeing that they did fail and
Right.
failed a lot of
A
times.
lot of time.
I recently said this another time, but
Mhm.
you always see the finished work,
Right.
but I can always appreciate when someone talks about the hard
Right.
time that it actually took to get there.
Right.
And I think that's also why I appreciate your book so much,
Mhm.
because you break it down and you talk
Right.
about like how you got to where you got, and not
Mhm.
just this is what it is. It gives people hope in a sense
Right.
that you can fail and get back up. And education's very big in
Mhm.
your book and what you speak on. So just getting those degrees and those certifications.
Right. And,
Um,
and I take it back to, I think I told the story when I was like in sixth grade. And an important point is that, when I was like in, I think, obviously I have a doctorate degree today and a master's degree, but school wasn't always that easy.
mhm,
When I was in the sixth grade, it's one of those things where, that old saying, if you start behind, you finish behind.
mhm.
And I remember just being the kid where, you've got the single mom that's working all the time, so she can't really watch you all the time. And as a
Mhm.
kid, you're just going to play the games, right? You're
Yeah,
going, oh, yeah,
yeah,
you get bad grades, and then your mom goes, hey, you need to do better. And then you get them
yeah,
up, and then she goes back to work, and then they go back down again.
yeah.
And I can remember, what do they say? If you don't learn those lessons in the third grade, when you get to fourth grade,
You know.
it becomes that much
Mhm.
harder because now you're not building upon those English lessons. So now, so
Exactly.
by the time you get to sixth grade, it's not that the kid's a bad kid. You're just sitting in class like, I don't know what's going on. This is
Exactly.
just all foreign to me. And you're just,
Mhm.
so literally, I got to the seventh grade and I almost failed out of seventh grade. I had 3 Fs, 2 Ds, and 1 C in the seventh
Mhm.
grade. And I was getting ready to get held back a grade because I just didn't learn the lessons previous years. And then I got to class and I basically was just sitting there like, wow, I don't know what's going on.
Yeah.
I could barely read, write, math was horrible. And that's because I wasn't applying myself. Looking back on it now, I can
Yeah.
see how valuable that is. But that's how valuable it is to keep kids current and and for continuing education to build upon those lessons, because otherwise you'll get 6, 7 years deep before you try to correct it, and then it can often be too late. So it's important to pay attention to that.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, not too late, very costly.
Very costly, right?
Of
Yeah.
just like having to kind of backtrack on that. Um, for mentorship, you're a college
Yep.
professor
Mhm.
as well. Is like, what does mentorship for you mean in the sense of how you show up for your
Absolutely.
students or?
So what I try to do is, so for example, it was about a year ago when we finished the program, but for example, for St. Petersburg College, I was the co-chair for the mentorship committee for the College of Computer and Information Technology. So for example, we would have, any students that were looking for mentors, like in the industry, I'm a vice president of program management for a DoD contracting company. They would pair one-on-one students with the mentor. And then I could kind of, meet with them weekly. Hey, what are your career goals?
Yeah.
When I was at your level, these are the things that I would recommend you take a look at. And it isn't for me to tell this young person, hey, you should do X, Y, Z.
Yeah.
My goal is to share my experiences and give my knowledge and tutelage, and
Mhm.
then they take in the good and throw
Yeah,
out the bad and make
exactly.
that their own story. So it's to teach them how to think for themselves and give them perspective, so that way
Yeah.
they can make decisions for themselves for their best interest. So for example, I was a co-chair, so I had about 50 or 60 college students,
Mhm.
and the college actually let them go through all my program, my 100 lesson program, and it taught them how to structure their career and how to, like, do one thing per year, a degree, a certification, or a job promotion. And
Yeah.
I actually helped a lot of the kids like kind of start building their career development plan early on. And then I think I've done like discovery day, where I think I had like maybe 30 or 40 students and talked about how to start like small LLCs and get into
Okay.
YouTube monetization, different
Yeah.
things like that. So basically, it's just me giving back my knowledge and what I know, and it gives me pride and joy to actually see them kind of reach some of their goals.
Awesome. And are you still in contact with a lot of
Absolutely. I actually get
your
emails
students?
probably like once every quarter. I'll get an email from somebody going, hey, I was working for Spectrum and I was like on the call center, and now I'm
Yeah.
actually got my first help desk job with Microsoft, and I'm working online, and now I'm going to be traveling the world and doing different things like that. So thank you for giving me that perspective early. I got this cert and that cert like you told me to,
Yeah.
and now I'm more viable on the job market. I have, my resume looks better because I did those things while I was in college as opposed to waiting until after.
Exactly. Wow, that's awesome. That's awesome. It definitely can give just a sense of like joy. Yeah,
Absolutely.
that
And let them know
that
that,
it was an
hey,
impact.
life is chaotic.
Yeah.
There's going to be ups and downs. You're going to have wins. You're going to have losses. just hang in there and stay in the game. If you do have a setback, that's okay. I've had 50 of them. Just dust yourself off. And one of the most valuable pieces of advice, actually that I heard from my late great Uncle Willie, he told me, he said, if you wash your car, it runs better. You ever think about that? It's like your car, it's like, when it's dirty, it doesn't really feel like it's moving. But the second you wash it, it just feels like it runs better.
It feels,
And it's like, that doesn't make any sense that you wash your car will run better. But I would argue that people are the same way. When you're well groomed, when your hair's cut, when you brush your teeth, when you put on nice clothes, when you're presentable, when you stand up straight, you just feel like you operate better. And that's just a really good lesson in life. If you wash your car, it runs better.
I like that. And that's a nugget to write down and keep because that's so true. Like if I just wake up and put like sweatpants on and just go, in comparison to actually like getting dressed and like you feel good, so you do good.
Your aura, your presence is more there, and people can sense that on you.
Yeah. No, I love that. Well, is there any additional nuggets that you'd like to share?
Yeah, I mean, I would just say, appreciate the life that you've been given, right? Look at every day as a second chance and an opportunity to not, better yourself and also support others in your life. And I think that, that'll create a very fulfilling existence for yourself. I would challenge the audience, what do you want out of life? What's your next move? Where do you want to go? And how do you share that with your community and the people around you to make them better? So I just would bid everybody the best of luck, and I wish you all good fortune.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate your time. And also, his book is on Kindle, Kindle, right? Lucky to Be Here. So I would definitely grab your copy. It is a very good book. I read it through and through.
Thank you very much.
So thank you so much.
As I always say, take what serves you, release what doesn't, and however you're becoming, do it with God. Until next time, keep growing gracefully.